So I don't think just anything would be acceptable to claim that you've responsibly repealed Obamacare and begin the process of reforming healthcare to what I believe and most Republicans believe is the right path, which is away from government-controlled and more free market-led and patient-centered care. More choices, more competition, we believe drives the cost down and the quality up. And I think you see that all the time in markets of all kinds. Now, that said, there's still the issue of high-risk individuals and people with pre-existing conditions. I've always maintained that I'm for markets and market-based reforms, but I think the government has a responsibility in a limited way and in a very responsible way. And I think we've done that in this case with pre-existing conditions and high-risk individuals, and that is calling for continuous care so nobody can be dropped. Now, you're not mandated. That's the other thing that I philosophically believe, and I think would be at the core from a policy standpoint of real repeal of Obamacare. I mean, you got people on the far left saying that this is going to, leave people dying in the streets, and you have people on the far right saying this is Obamacare light. Sometimes when you got folks on both sides saying that this is bad policy, you might have struck the balance that you're looking for. To me, again, the role of government in this case is, and I believe it's most appropriately managed at the state level, not the federal level, and that is to provide some assistance to people who are so risky that they would either be dropped if the law didn't prohibit people being dropped from coverage because of a condition, and that there was some way to mitigate against their premiums, because the markets will price them with a product. It just will be so high that they won't be able to afford it.
So why didn't you wait for the CBO score?
Well, I don't think the CBO score was based on about 90% of what we've already gotten. We have something that adds $15 billion that we negotiated. That's the Palmer Amendment. The Upton adds $8 billion, so there's $23 billion. And what you'll see possibly is the number of uninsured go down, not go up from that number that I think is not based in reality any more than they were off by 100% on the number of people that would be on the Obamacare exchanges. But if anything, having that federal risk sharing to transition to state high-risk pools, if anything, that's going to bring costs down. If you get more flexibility and you can prove you take care of pre-existing conditions, but you get more flexibility on essential health benefits, that brings, on the majority of people, will bring the premiums down. I see that helping the score on number of insured, if that's somebody's metric, but I don't think it adds a significant amount of cost.
They're saying they need like 175 billion. I mean, this 15 billion and 8 billion. I mean, that's just kind of a drop in the bucket, isn't it?
You know what? You've got resources at about $130 billion. That's in the stabilization fund, in addition to the 15 plus 8. So we've got well over $100 billion. You've got all working towards the same goal, which is premium reduction and taking care of those with pre-existing conditions. And then you've got states now with tremendous flexibility. 5% of the population is what we're talking about, essentially, of folks who have these pre-existing conditions. And I think that the states can take care of them. I think the federal government is doing their job to provide billions of dollars in support and the greatest amount of flexibility. And I think you're going to see, on top of that, you're going to see competition bring the price down. So you're not going to see the same options or lack thereof that you see in the current market. So It's not one thing, Matt. It's all of them working together, and it's giving greater assurance on the front end that we can keep a stable premium and a reduction in premium, and nobody loses care. That's unless you choose to. And if you choose to pull out, and you do that for over 60 days, then you are penalized to come back in. Because if you wait till your house burns down to buy homeowner's insurance, you ought to be penalized for that. That's irresponsible. So I'm glad that with work requirements and requirements like this, that we have incentives for good, responsible behavior. Now, that's quite a novel idea for government to actually incentivize responsible behavior.
So I always felt like with healthcare, you can approach it from two ways. You can either try to address the amount of people insured, or you can try to address the costs. I mean, it sounds like you're trying to address the cost, but the result of this is going to be more people uninsured. I mean, you talked about people with the mandate, but the mandate was there to drive costs down. So people are going to go uninsured in your district. I think, is it fair to say?
Oh yeah,
that?
yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, so how do you justify voting for something when, you know?
Because I'll tell you this,
CBO says 24 million.
Sure. Over 10 years, 24 million people. Remember, again, they were off by 11 million when they said, here's the number of people that would avail themselves of Obamacare government-controlled plans. It didn't happen like they predicted. They were way off. But let's assume that, and then they said the reason you're going to see this over 10 years is is because primarily you aren't mandating people have insurance. So there are people that choose not to have it. So we're now upset because we don't want people to choose to not have it, even though if they get sick after choosing not to have it, they're going to be dinged because they didn't have a continual care. Look, there are more people that don't have access to care now that then will not be insured by even CBO's predictions, which I think are off. The metric isn't insurance cards. The metric is who can afford the care. That's access, because the people I talk to every day out here, it doesn't matter what their insurance card says, they can't afford the premium, they can't afford the deductible, period. So I think the scenario today is worse. If you use the metric of insurance cards, that's one thing. If you use access to care and you use cost as the driver on that, which it would be, then I think you're going to see those costs go down when you're not telling the insurance companies what products they have to offer. It is the largest entitlement reform since the 1960s. The entitlement programs are driving us into the debt where today we spend 70% of our budget on mandatory programs. Those mandatory programs and entitlement programs are causing us to be in 20 trillion, soon to be 30 trillion in debt. That's the biggest threat to this country.
So let me ask you a question. If someone's not able to afford health insurance, do you think they should have access to it? Do you think they should be able to get it if they can't afford health insurance? Because I feel like that's the crux of the argument here, right?
Yeah, I think we all want more affordable care. If you bring the cost down, which again, that didn't happen. The opposite happened here, right? So just having insurance has not solved the problem. Even those with pre-existing care can't afford the cost of care with their insurance card, even though they're technically covered. So the idea is, what's going to bring costs down? And it's barriers lifting, removing barriers to innovation, removing barriers to competition, giving states more flexibility so that you'll never innovate with a one-size-fits-all top-down model. My faith isn't in CBO. My faith is in the states and their innovation and creativity and giving deference to them and not having the federal government dictate how they ought to cover people. My faith is in the markets. My faith is in the people to choose. That's where I'm putting my faith in it, not in some CBO projection.
So do you want Texas to seek that waiver?
You know what? If Texas feels like it's in the best interest of Texas to have that kind of flexibility, and we're very freedom-loving, independent-minded people that don't like the federal government to tell us what is and is not essential health benefits, then yes, I want Texas to be the freest, I want it to continue to be the freest state in the union. Because if you look at the state that represents the most government-centric state in the union, it's California. That's where we were going. I'd like the country to go more towards Texas model. Now, with that said, they are required to take care of pre-existing conditions and ensure that there's continuous coverage and that there's some way to mitigate against the higher cost for people that are higher risk. That's a requirement. So absolutely, avail yourselves of the freedom and flexibility, but make sure we cover the pre-existing conditions. Those with I feel strongly about that. I got a dad with cancer. I had heart surgery when I was 27 years old. I mean, this isn't just theoretical for me. Now, I get it. People are scared. People who have children. I've gotten emails that say, my child had a heart condition. I don't know what I would have done if they didn't have access to insurance. I understand the concerns, and it's a legitimate concern. But I'm telling you that the law we passed provides remedy for people who are concerned about getting kicked out of insurance or being so priced out they effectively don't.
So what changes do you expect the Senate to make?
That's the since we deal in billions in the federal government, unfortunately, that's the $100 billion question. You know, Dave, I hope they do very little, but history would suggest otherwise. They're gonna be more moderate in their view of every issue, including health care. It's not that they couldn't maybe find some ways to improve it. I'm open to that too. I think it's going to be, they've got a working group. They've already been looking at it. I think they were pleased with what we gave them. We've taken out the cloture issue, the 60 vote issue. So they're still just negotiating with Republicans because we're not going to get any Democrats. They've got to demonstrate to the American people like we have that when Republicans are in power and there is a big problem before us, we know how to govern and solve the problem. We can't complete that statement without the Senate, but now the onus is on them and the focus is on them. I think if they don't do this, you're going to see a hue and cry from the voters.
How did you get the Freedom Caucus on board? Because my understanding was that it was this AHCA got rid of restrictions on what you can charge people with pre-existing conditions, what you can charge the elderly. I mean, in order to get this passed, it became more relaxed, and I mean, aren't those going to directly affect people's premiums and the fact that they're going to go higher?
Well, you will have more flexibility within the general population because health status is not a factor where they can flex, but flexing on age and other things to make it, and on essential benefits. I mean, if we want everybody to have the same, that's socialized medicine. That's very different. If we want there to be such thing as risk-based premiums in some form without pricing out high-risk people, with some way to pull out the 5% who are the riskiest, the 5% who actually spend about a third of the cost, maybe it's 25%, a quarter of the cost, there are ways to do that. There are policy solutions already to do that. But the other thing about having some risk basis to pricing is personal responsibility. I mean, there's an obesity epidemic in this country, and it's causing people to have comorbidity status where we can't, they're the most costly, and there are some things that are preventative. Some of them are genetic, but a lot of them aren't. We have people that use the emergency room for primary care, about $2 billion in Texas alone, unnecessary use of the ER for things that they could use their primary care doctor for. Listen, this system's broken. It is broken all the way down. It's broken from price fixing and over-regulating and mandating people have to do something, all the way down to Medicaid, where people don't have a work requirement, where people don't have any skin in the game. There's no copay, there's no deductible, there's no premium, there's nothing. I've never seen anything good happen when people got something for nothing, never. so there's more to be done. It's not like this is going to create the market-driven solutions that we believe are necessary to get to real affordable care, but it's a big step in that direction. You can't do it all in one bill. This is, we've talked about before, a budgetary vehicle that is being used because we can't get one single Democrat to vote to do anything with Obamacare, certainly not to repeal it. Yeah. So for those people who question whether this is a repeal, ask every Democrat in the House that voted against it. They suggest it needs tweaking, it needs fine-tuning. I would tell you it is an abject failure, and it's indisputable that it's failed us. Now, I'm not questioning the intentions or the motives, I'm questioning the means. Let's now walk this thing way back and let's get it on track to have true free market forces in play where we get choice and we get lower cost.